Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I will not mourn, nor will I rejoice. Death is not something to be taken lightly. I've learned that the hard way.
A BC mother serving a life sentence for murdering her 8-year-old daughter has died in prison. Plus,
42% of all Metro Vancouver homeowners are mortgage-free. Giving them a grant just simply doesn't make sense to me.
the debate continues over homeowner grants in BC. What about renters?
I would honestly love to see her expression on that.
A BC woman is boldly going to her final resting place among the stars, with some stars.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. A warning for you, our top story contains details some people may find upsetting. A Surrey woman convicted of killing her 8-year-old daughter has died in prison. The Correctional Service Canada says Lisa Batstone died Monday in a BC prison while serving a life sentence for second-degree murder. She was convicted in 2009 for killing her daughter, 8-year-old Tegan. For more, we're joined by the CBC's Liam Britton. Liam, first of all, what do we know about Lisa's death?
Well, Correctional Service Canada says Lisa Batstone died at Fraser Valley Institution in Abbotsford on Monday. No cause of death was given, but officials are reviewing it. And Batstone was convicted in 2019 of second-degree murder for the killing of her daughter Tegan and was sentenced to life with no chance of parole for 15 years. Evidence was presented that she did it to spite her ex-husband. Batstone's state of mind was the major issue at trial. Her lawyers argued she suffered from borderline personality disorder and anxiety, but the judge said Batstone was still morally culpable for what she termed a, quote, abhorrent breach of trust. She appealed her conviction 2 years ago, arguing her mental illness was not given sufficient weight by the judge, but that appeal was rejected.
Liam, Tegan's father attended much of that trial. What does he have to say about his ex-wife's death?
Oh yeah, Gabe Batstone now lives in Ottawa with his wife and their 2 sons. He says he will not mourn nor rejoice at Lisa's death, and it's memories of Tegan that are front of mind.
We think about it every day, but she lives on with us in our hearts. We talk about her every day. Tegan would love this. We have a playlist called Tegan's Tunes, where we sometimes just play Tegan's favorite music, and her pictures are all over the house. So I think we found a way to mourn her, but then move on and actually just have her live on with us.
Now, Gabe has called for changes to how child custody is handled in divorce cases. He argues the best interests of children must be the priority, not the parents. Now, I've also heard from Lisa's lawyer, Eric Gottardi. He says his team spoke with Batstone in December, and she seemed in good spirits. He called her death a complete surprise. In a statement, he says Lisa suffered from severe depression and other mental illnesses. She reached out to the healthcare system and begged for help only days before the death of her daughter. He added that because of her mental health, he felt Lisa deserved better care and support throughout her life. And Gottardi is calling for public answers on how Lisa Batstone died. Dan?
Liam Britton reporting. Thank you. The BC government has been slapped with a fine of more than $700,000 for unsafe wildfire mitigation work. WorkSafe BC says it found evidence of unsafe tree falling practices at a worksite near Wanawan, about 80 kilometers northwest of Fort St. John. The agency says the province did not verify faller certification or actively monitor work as required. BC's Ministry of Forests says the fine is, quote, arbitrary and disproportionately high, and plans to appeal it. Warmer winter weather may be a welcome reprieve for some British Columbians, but Environment Canada warns it's brought some dangerous concerns for the spring. Zara Premji has more on the uncertainty in the months ahead.
I think there's a lot of reasons to be a little bit worried.
BC has had a wildly warm winter.
Definitely a weird season.
And what that could mean for the spring ahead has experts concerned.
We haven't built the snowpacks that we need this time of year.
This is the reservoir at Cleveland Dam. As you can see, it is filled up, the water is flowing, but that wasn't the case just before December.
Environment Canada says the bit of rainfall that has come has brought some reprieve, but just not enough.
While we went into this sort of fall, early winter in a drought situation, we haven't really done much at this point in time to alleviate it at all.
In December 2022, this is what it looked like on top of North Vancouver's Mount Seymour. On December 30th, 2023, just days ago, this is what it looked like. The snowpack clearly not where it was in previous years, and the concern climbing, even if cautious optimism is there too.
It's kind of one of those wait and see things. We've got, typically we can get a good snowpack through January and February on the coast, so we're still hopeful.
Metro Vancouver says the water restrictions won't start any earlier than the planned May 1st, but after that, staff will assess to see if the next stages need to kick in earlier.
Unfortunately, people in this region are some of the highest water users in Canada, so we've got a lot of improvements that we can do for water conservation and to make sure that our water lasts us through the season. So it's something we should be mindful of all year, not just, when we see a drought coming.
But with no certainty on what the future holds, a lot of uncertainty remains.
Probably a top of mind for many people. What's it going to do from a fire point of view moving forward?
As we wait to see just how wet and cold the next couple of months will be, Procter & Walsh are warning British Columbians to conserve water. Let that lawn go gold and don't wait for an official advisory. Conserve now and all year round. Zara Premji, CBC News, Burnaby.
A BC woman is set to make history years after her death. Her ashes will travel on board a rocket soon to be blasted into space. As Sarab Sandhu reports, it's a memorial journey in honor of her passion for Star Trek. And she won't be alone among the stars.
Next week, when the ship known as the Vulcan rocket takes off from Florida, it will be flying with more than just spacefaring equipment. It will also carry the ashes of Gloria Nolan, a 86-year-old Vancouver woman who died in 2011.
She was very interested in things to do with space and extraterrestrials, the paranormal, and reincarnation.
An avid Star Trek fan, Gloria Nolan loved to collect replica starships. Every Christmas, adorning her tree with Star Trek ornaments. After her death, her children decided to honor her memory by sending her remains to space.
I think she would have been quite surprised at the fact that we had made this choice. I would honestly love to see her expression on that.
Nolan's ashes will be carried in a capsule aboard a deep space Voyager mission known as the Enterprise flight. The capsule will also carry the DNA of Wendy Doohan, whose husband James Doohan acted in the original Star Trek series. James Doohan's ashes were also flown to space after he died in 2005.
It's kind of joining Jimmy on this space mission that he's going on right now.
Celestis Inc., the company behind the service, has been offering the memorial space flight for a number of years.
Imagine it's like a time capsule, a cosmic archive of our civilization at this point that will be out there in orbit around the sun forever.
But this will be the first time that human DNA will be going into deep space.
But it will be the furthest repository of our civilization out that far in the solar system.
Space flights usually carry commercial or government satellites, depending on the mission. But this Celestis spacecraft, a specialized capsule attached to the main rocket, will have on board small samples of hundreds of human DNA.
We send what we consider a symbolic portion, which is about 1 gram.
The capsule will also carry the DNA of several other prominent personalities, including Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry and his wife, Majel Barrett Roddenberry.
You can go to our website and you can see where your loved one is over the Earth, literally traveling like 17,000 miles an hour in orbit, orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes.
The rocket takes off on January 8th from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, taking Gloria Nolan, along with many other devotees of space, to their final resting place. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, White Rock.
If you own a home or property in BC, you may have applied for it over the years, the Homeowner Grant. It allows most homeowners to get hundreds of dollars directly from the province every year. The government updated those rules around it yesterday. But as Justin McElroy explains, others wonder if it is still sound policy.
British Columbia does something no other province in Canada does: give hundreds of dollars to homeowners every year, regardless of income, age, or their home ownership status. All they have to do is apply for something called the Homeowner Grant. As the government lays out on its own website, pretty much any homeowner can get either $570 or $770 from the government, provided their property is assessed at less than $2.15 million. Which is more than 90% of homes in this province. Now, every year this becomes a story because the magic number to get the grant goes up. And every year there are people wondering why British Columbia does this.
42% of all Metro Vancouver homeowners are mortgage-free. Giving them a grant when so many other people are suffering just simply doesn't make sense to me.
That is Michael Geller, a Vancouver developer and architect. He argues it's not a smart tax for a lot of reasons, including the fact that it's province-wide, and a $2 million house in Vancouver looks a lot different than a $2 million one in the rest of this province. But he understands why politicians won't touch it.
Given that 60% of the residents of British Columbia are homeowners, suggesting that you might take away their grant is not politically astute.
We asked the government for their thoughts, and they said they thought the benefit was modest and argued that renters are now going to get a similar program in the form of a $400 rebate. Well, sort of. Here is a chart. Yes, that renter's rebate is coming that will max out at $400 a renter household, but the province estimates it will spend $910 million on homeowner grants this year. Now, there are around 1.4 million households that own their property in this province. So do the math, cover the zero, and they're getting a lot more cold hard cash from the government than renters will get in the form of a tax credit. But we do a lot of things differently here in British Columbia, and you can add the money we give to homeowners to that list. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meanwhile, the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver says the region closed out 2023 with higher home sales despite higher borrowing costs.
2023 was actually, in my view, a fairly strong year, all things considered. We have to take into account that we're in this very, very high interest rate environment, which is translated to very high mortgage rates.
The board says more than 1,300 homes changed hands last month, up about 3% from December 2022. Home prices rose last year due to low inventory. The average home price now stands at nearly $1.17 million. If you take transit in Metro Vancouver, here's a heads up. The union representing nearly 200 transit workers employed by Coast Mountain Bus Company, a subsidiary of TransLink, has issued a strike notice. As Jessica Chung explains, job action could start as early as this weekend.
CUPE Local 4500 says it's serving 72-hour strike notice after a day of mediated negotiations with the employer. It represents more than 180 transit workers, including supervisors, engineers, and maintenance workers. The last collective agreement expired at the end of 2022. Negotiations for a new contract started this past October with the Coast Mountain Bus Company, which operates Metro Vancouver transit buses. The union says job action is a last resort, but it maintains the employer hasn't addressed key issues in the negotiations.
At the end of the day, it was pretty clear that the employer wasn't ready to address our main issues. So we had no choice but to take this drastic action.
For its part, the company says it has offered the same wage increase given to its other employees. Job action could begin on Saturday morning with an overtime ban. It would affect all operations in the Coast Mountain system. The union says it is willing to negotiate a collective agreement that avoids service disruptions. Jessica Chung, CBC News, Vancouver.
Starting this week, Vancouver police officers will wear body cameras as part of a 6-month trial.
Where you have a public that essentially carries around with them in their pocket a high definition camera, that for police not to also have such a camera recording their in particular hostile interactions with the public, that it may lead the public to say, well, why don't they have that camera, and actually hurt in the trust equation.
The department says up to 100 officers will be trained and more than $300,000 spent on the test run. Body cams were recommended by a coroner's inquest looking into the beating death of a man in Burnaby. Miles Gray was killed in a 2015 confrontation with numerous VPD officers. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency has announced a recall of baby formula products due to bacterial contamination risks. It's recalling the Nutrimidgen A+ with LGG hypoallergenic infant formula. The batch of products included have an expiration date of January 1st of next year. People who bought the recalled products are warned not to feed them to kids or eat them. Instead, throw them out or return them to wherever you bought them. Well, from grocery prices to rent, the rising cost of living was a huge concern last year. And economic forecasts predict prices will continue to rise in 2024. Our Prairie breaks down some of the things you can expect to pay for more of this year.
Here's what will cost you more this year in BC. Let's start with groceries. While some food will get cheaper this year, like dry goods and non-perishables, overall grocery bills are still expected to go up. According to this report, the typical Canadian family of 4 can expect an increase of about $700 in their annual food bill. You'll likely see the higher prices for baked goods, meat, and vegetables. So what about utilities? FortisBC, which provides power to some parts of BC, has raised electricity rates by 6.74% this January. This will cost the average customer about an extra $11.26 per month. BC Hydro has also applied to the BC Utilities Commission for a 2.3% rate hike that would start on April 1st, 2024, if it's approved. But if you lower your household's energy use by 10% this year compared to 2023, you'll be eligible for up to $100 in BC Hydro credits under the Team Power Smart Conservation Challenge. And what about housing? Well, if you're renting, landlords can increase their rent up to 3.5% this year. Meanwhile, house prices in Greater Vancouver will rise about 3% according to this market survey forecast. It's lower than the national average, but houses in BC are still the priciest in Canada. And if you're taking the ferry starting April 1st, BC Ferry's fare prices will go up by an average of 3.2% each year for the next 4 years. The Ministry of Transportation says provincial funding helped minimize the fare from being even higher. Prairie, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meteorologist Russ Slickate joins us now with her first peek at the weather. We saw in Zara's piece, Russ, the concerns about the snowpack and that they still want us to conserve water. So what's happening now?
Very real concerns indeed, Dan. And, we have some good news. We've been chatting about it the last couple of days that there is snow coming to the mountains, maybe a little bit to parts of the lower mainland as well. But more importantly, to the mountains, we need the freezing level to come down for that to happen. And we've been in a holding pattern for a number of days, still sort of studying this split flow in the jet stream offshore. And it's really split completely into a giant Y now. A few days back, of course, day after day, our weather system's coming in from the south. And what I see happening between now and, say, Sunday, give or take, is this ridge of high pressure that's building offshore backs up farther into the Pacific, and it opens the door for the jet stream to come racing down the coastline. So completely different in a handful of days from now, and that's going to allow the freezing level to come way down, cool things off in the lower mainland, and give a real good shot in the arm for snow for the ski hills as well. Here we are currently looking at some light rain spreading ashore in Metro Vancouver. That more significant system shows up for tomorrow and makes things wet. A little bit of flurry activity in parts of the inland sections of the north coast. More significant snow heading towards Stewart for today. Now, it really didn't cool off that much today. Far northeast corner of the province, minus 14 in Fort Nelson. That number comes down to 30 below by this weekend. Fort St. John, about minus 25. Central interior and parts of the Caribou, minus 10, minus 15. We're going to gradually cool things off this weekend. The lower mainland doesn't cool off right away, but we're getting there. Some light rain for tonight. I think it's going to hang around for a while yet, maybe throughout the day tomorrow. The only warnings we have, of course, in Alberta, the dense fog warning, the snowfall warning, and that is specifically for Stewart, 15 to 25 centimeters overnight and tomorrow morning. Here's your Metro Vancouver 24-hour outlook. It's wet this evening. It's wet overnight and tomorrow morning. Only getting up to 7 tomorrow, so a shade cooler as it dries out tomorrow night, Dan. That opens the door for some cooling. We'll talk about that a little later.
Sounds good. Thanks, Russ. It may be January, but gardeners and farmers are still thinking about all things green and growing. After the break, a master gardener breaks down why winter soil health is important, especially since we've had a warmer start to the season. Stick around. And thanks for joining our commercial-free live stream tonight. The tennis PEI program is now without a home court for the winter months. The indoor courts have been at the Royalty Crossing Mall for decades, but that area is going to be renovated. And as Stacey Janzer reports, the people who used to use it say they already feel the loss.
It's a big, huge problem.
Marina Silva Ops' son Elijah has been playing tennis for half his life. He's 14 now and he's won trophies in multiple provinces. But now, without this indoor court, she says training is going to be more difficult.
These kids need to train every single day, and not having the possibility to train in a court that has the proper dimensions, the proper surface, or some sort of acceptable surface is a huge deal.
Sunday was the last day players got a chance to be on the court. Tennis PEI cleared out the space this morning. David Jenkins has been playing with a group of friends since it opened in the 80s. He says he'll miss it.
Collegiality thing too, because our group was 8 guys who would play, and we would get together and play tennis on Wednesday evenings for 2 hours and shift around and have different partners, and then we would have a little bite to eat or whatever and a sip after our tennis game, and it was a Wednesday night out in the middle of the week. So it's sad to lose all that.
There will be programming over the winter in some schools, along with UPEI and the APM Center in Cornwall. But Tennis PEI says it'll still be difficult for players.
They're definitely going to be upset for the next few months, and it's going to be a tough one for them to really kind of keep the training the same as the other provinces.
The lack of proper courts means the Ops family will need to travel early to competitions to get time on a real tennis surface.
He gets 2 days at least of practice on a proper surface, and to make it possible for him to be at least competitive in some way with all the other kids that are practicing today and were practicing yesterday, right? And that's a big problem.
She says Tennis PEI hasn't done enough to make alternate plans, even though it's known for months that the facility was closing. Tennis PEI says it's reached out to the city of Charlottetown and Stratford, as well as all levels of government, to build an indoor facility that would work for tennis, squash, and pickleball. So far, there haven't been any commitments. Stacey Janzer, CBC News, Charlottetown.
Well, it may not be the season for some produce, but tending a garden is a year-round commitment. Many gardeners plant cover crops in the fall to protect the soil and prepare for spring, and Alex Kaiser is one of them. He's a master gardener at Riley Park Community Garden at Southlands Heritage Farm, and he joins us now. Alex, thanks for being here. Why are cover crops so important?
Yeah, so cover crops are a really awesome way to protect your soil in the winter. A lot of people don't realize that we get so much rain in the winter at the coast that it can actually compact the soil. The other factor is improving your soil quality. So some types of cover crops are really great at breaking up the soil with their kind of fibrous roots. And others are actually able to enrich the soil for you.
So for gardeners who didn't plant a cover crop in the fall this time, what's the next best thing they can do?
So the next best thing they can do is just keep the soil covered. In natural ecological systems, the soil is never left bare. So there's always some kind of leaf litter, something covering the soil and really feeding it and creating habitat for all kinds of insects and invertebrates and stuff.
What's the best thing to use as a cover?
The best thing to use as a cover in our situation, I think, is leaves. We get a lot of leaves in the fall, so you can rake those up and save them and then toss them on your beds.
We also know, and you talked about how rain can impact the soil. It has been a very warm winter so far this year. What impact does that have on gardens now and when planting starts again?
Well, a lot of people might have noticed things blooming a lot earlier than they normally do. Even some of your spring bulbs coming up now. That could be an issue. Really, like there's nothing we can do about it. If we go into a cold snap again, some foliage might be damaged, but it won't be the end of the world for those plants.
So if you've got something that's blooming now just because it hasn't been as cold as normal, are certain things actually going to survive?
Yeah, everything should survive. I mean, you might notice a little bit of like the flowers browning. In the case of like really early blooming bulbs, if those get hit by a really intense frost, they might be a little damaged as well. But you know, they'll look bad for a little while, and that'll be it. They should survive.
Mm-hmm. And is there any treatment that you need to do, whether it's covering them, heating them? What would you do?
I mean, you can, if you're really worried about things like spring bulbs coming up, you can put a little extra leaf cover on them that'll protect them from any frost. But really, like sometimes the most hands-off approach is the best approach when it comes to gardening.
Leave it alone. Alex Kaiser, a master gardener at Riley Park Community Garden and Southlands Heritage Farm. Thanks for your time and your expertise.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Japanese authorities are inspecting the remains of 2 planes that crashed into each other at a Tokyo airport, killing 5 people. More on the tragedy in the wake of the country's recent earthquake after this.
Developer Tim Banks bought 2 properties in Savage Harbor, totaling more than 60 acres, including the controversial house under construction at 251 Kelpie Lane.
We're going to use it as our private residence. It's half built now. We're tightening it up for the winter. Going to finish it next spring and move into it. And it's as simple as that.
Banks says he never second-guessed the purchase, despite the controversy around the property. So why purchase it?
Well, it's a nice property, and don't need to explain it.
Concerns over the stone armoring installed on the beach next to the property led to a report recommending sweeping changes in how the island manages its coastlines. Tons of rock were installed right down to the waterline to protect the property from erosion, but it also impeded public access to the beach. Banks says the rock wall will stay.
Oh, it sticks out so far.
Bryson Guptill is an avid hiker and has been critical of the development, especially the armor stone on the beach. He'd like to see it removed.
It doesn't make it any more okay than it was previously. The 2 primary concerns are that the main building, there are 5 buildings involved, but the main building is closer to the bank than what is allowed in the regulations. It's about 50 feet from the bank instead of 75 required in the regulations. And the second thing is that the armor stone shore protection is essentially on the public beach.
Banks says he plans to donate 40 to 50 acres of the land back to the province to protect wetlands in the area. Officials with the province did confirm those discussions are underway.
We feel that it's a very important thing to do. I've been involved in a lot of this in the past, and we will continue to do in the future.
Banks says he's not worried about the controversy dogging him when he starts construction again in the spring.
We're going to use it as a private residence. It's our business and no one else's.
Wayne Thibodeau, CBC News, Pointe du Roche.
An investigation has begun into the deadly crash at a Tokyo airport yesterday. It's still not clear what could have caused two planes to collide. But as Lindsay Duncombe explains, some red flags are emerging.
In the wreckage, the search for clues begins. Anything to answer how this happened. The deadly fiery collision after a Dash 8 Coast Guard plane somehow ended up on the same runway as a landing Japan Airlines jet.
Investigators will be looking at the actual procedures, the signage, the phraseology that was used.
Air traffic control transcripts reveal the Japan Airlines plane was cleared to land, but the smaller plane wasn't given the okay to take off. One potential factor, this notice to pilots and crews issued at the Haneda Airport on December 27th says warning lights that indicate if a runway is clear were not working on the runway where the accident occurred.
The investigators will be looking at that and whether or not that played a role.
Because the Dash 8 was made in Canada by Bombardier, the Canadian Transportation Board will participate.
So anytime a Canadian product or that's either designed or manufactured in Canada or a Canadian operator or a registered aircraft is involved in an accident internationally.
Investigators will interview passengers.
Flames all over the windows, and the plane starts to shake and all the lights turn dark and everyone starts screaming in Japanese.
They will review video of the textbook evacuation that saw all 379 people on board the Japan Airlines jet survive, a result of the airline's commitment to safety.
Searchers were still combing debris.
Reinforced after a 1985 crash killed 520 people.
Japan Airlines is a very safe airline, and every airline that has a mishap or an unfortunate circumstance, we all learn from them.
Those lessons may well be needed. There have been warnings, including in Canada, of increasing near misses on runways. Understanding what happened here could prevent another tragedy. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meanwhile, the impacts of the New Year's Day earthquakes in Japan are far-reaching. Dozens are reported to have been killed as rescue workers still search through rubble. The former president of the National Association of Japanese Canadians is worried now about earthquake preparedness here in BC. She spoke with Early Edition host Stephen Quinn about her concerns.
In many cases, with the roads being broken up and so forth, the rescue folks aren't able to get to people. Right. So I think it's a really strong warning. It's very much a concern that my mom had with our family, and we have our grab and go kits and our earthquake kits. And I'm always preaching about get your kits ready. You never know, because it's not if, it's when we have an earthquake here. And I get worried that we're not as prepared. Mm-hmm. And this is a good example of you're not going to sometimes have that help. You're going to have to manage on your own.
There are growing fears that Israel's war against Hamas could expand into a regional conflict. A drone strike yesterday that killed a senior Hamas official in Lebanon has led to threats of retaliation against Israel. Sasha Petrusik has the latest.
With frontier skirmishes almost every day, Israeli bombs and shells land inside Lebanon. Rockets from the militant group Hezbollah, an ally of Hamas, hit communities in Israel. But yesterday's airstrike in Beirut, killing senior Hamas leader Saleh al-Aruri, could spark far more fighting, say Israeli residents in border towns. Definitely something will happen now, he says. There will be a war here. Israel won't say if it killed al-Aruri, but leaders of Israeli security forces, like the head of the spy agency Mossad, vow to get Hamas leaders, no matter where they are. And today, the head of Hezbollah promised revenge. The assassination will not go unanswered or unpunished, says Hassan Nasrallah. That worries Washington.
We remain incredibly concerned, as we have been from the outset of this conflict, about the risk of the conflict spreading into other fronts.
The kind of conflict that's leveled Gaza and even now has Palestinian civilians running for their lives as Israeli airstrikes target a refugee camp in central Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry says more than 120 have died in the past 24 hours. throughout the Palestinian territories, including the occupied West Bank. Palestinians are calling for even more resistance and retribution. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Toronto.
At least 95 people in Iran have been killed by 2 bombs. But who is responsible for those brutal killings remains unknown. Chris Brown reports it is adding uncertainty and fear to an already volatile region. And a warning for you, the story does contain graphic footage.
The images of the bombing's aftermath are too gruesome to show much, with wounded people everywhere and survivors doing what they can to help. Video appears to capture one of the 2 explosions in the distance. Iranian officials say it appears the devices were set off by remote control. The crowd was marching to the tomb of Qasem Soleimani in the city of Kerman. The revered Iranian commander was assassinated 4 years ago at Baghdad's airport.
The #1 terrorist anywhere in the world.
His death was ordered by U.S. President Donald Trump, and it triggered a deadly chain of events, including retaliatory strikes against a U.S. airbase and Iran's mistakenly shooting down a passenger jet in Tehran that killed everyone on board, including dozens of people on their way back to Canada. Whoever was responsible for this massacre, though, is not saying.
The Secretary General strongly condemns the attack today on a memorial ceremony in Kerman City.
Given the extreme tension already in the region and that Israel's war against Hamas has drawn in Iranian proxies such as Hezbollah in southern Lebanon and the Houthis in the Red Sea, right off the bat, some Iranian media voices blamed their arch foe.
It could be something that ISIS, could be behind it.
But this British-based Middle East expert says she thinks a jihadi group is far more likely to have done this than Israel.
I saw Khamenei's statement. He did not single out Israel. Like, no one in Iran has directly blamed Israel yet.
With fears that Israel's war in Gaza could rapidly escalate, U.S. officials said they had nothing to do with the deadly blasts either. And Iran does have other enemies. The Islamic State, or ISIS, has mounted a number of attacks on Shia shrines and other civilian targets in recent years. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
A Liberal MP wants to change the oath of office for federal politicians. New Brunswick's Renee Arsenault has introduced a bill that would remove swearing allegiance to the monarch. And as John Paul Tasker explains, while Canadian Republicans are receptive, Royalists are riled.
The tradition has endured since Canada's founding.
I do swear that I will be faithful, and bear true allegiance,
Parliamentarians swearing an oath of allegiance to the monarch.
to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Now, a private member's bill proposes a big change. It would make the traditional oath optional for MPs and senators. Introduced only in French, the proposal would allow an alternative oath, with no mention of the country's head of state.
I don't see the word Canada in there.
This man fought a case against the requirement of a similar royal oath for federal public servants.
They gave me an ultimatum. They told me, you take the oath or you get fired. I told them, nope.
Pierre Vincent won. It's now optional for bureaucrats.
A tradition itself is not a good reason to be doing things like this, to be violating free speech.
This bill, it's stupid because we have a perfectly functioning system.
This monarchist is adamantly opposed to changing the oath. John Fraser says the country's long-standing ties to the crown are something to celebrate.
We live in a constitutional crown system, and trying to break it up and piecemeal it is not a good way to run a country.
This royal expert says legislation alone may not be enough. All 10 provinces may have to agree to a change, and the courts could weigh in.
That it's not just about personal allegiance to Charles III, that it's about your allegiance to Canada's constitution, Canada's people, Canada's system of governance.
The country's divided on the crown's future in Canada. Polls suggest more than half want to cut ties. That's unlikely to happen on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's watch. He says King Charles is someone who's deeply aligned with Canadian values. JP Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
Emergency rooms across Canada are struggling to deal with a surge in respiratory illnesses like COVID, RSV, and the flu. But the situation is being made worse by major staffing shortages. As Lauren Pelly reports, it's led to overflowing hospitals and long waits.
You're gonna sleep right after, huh? Of course you are.
While many Canadians relaxed over the holidays,
Not too much.
Joey Salmingo took his newborn to a crowded hospital with a fever.
It took an hour just to see a triage nurse.
Oh, I know.
And it was 7 more hours until Salmingo's son was admitted to a bed.
So as the hours just went by, obviously the frustration, the anger is setting in.
Patients across the country keep facing those kinds of hours-long waits. In Quebec, provincial data shows dozens of hospital ERs are overflowing. And the average waiting time on a stretcher hit 18 hours by Tuesday afternoon.
This is the worst the healthcare system has been ever. You know, we're seeing patients in stretchers laying there for days on end.
This nurse in Montreal says long waits are tied to ongoing staff shortages and pressure from the usual respiratory viruses, plus COVID as well.
COVID is rampant throughout the hospitals, throughout every unit.
At St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, upwards of 10% of patients on the wards are COVID positive.
It's often COVID intersecting with other illnesses and making people sick enough to end up in hospital.
He says most patients falling seriously ill with either COVID or influenza are also people who didn't get the latest vaccines. Federal data shows only 15% of the population got an updated COVID shot this fall.
Our vaccination rates across most populations and age groups, and in particular in children, are lower than we have seen in the past.
Doctors say there's still plenty of time to get those updated shots. COVID is still circulating, and the flu season in much of eastern Canada isn't expected to peak for several weeks. That means a busy winter ahead, and the more Canadians who can stay out of hospital, the better. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
We've told you about people's ashes being sent into space, but what are the implications? More on the fallout of space expeditions after the break.
So some might say, and I would agree, that it's the pinnacle, of the community, and it's a place where people gather to socialize, to have fun, to exercise, and to be social with others in the community. Yeah, so we're very excited about our new stones. For a small club, it's a big deal. Old stones, to my knowledge, have been around since the early 70s, maybe even the late 60s. So they have 50 plus years of usage, and that's more than the normal lifespan. Yeah, so today we have our after-school junior kids, grades 2 to 7. They're a fun group. We have approximately 23 kids in total. Sometimes it can get chaotic. They're great kids. They do their best. They really enjoy not only curling, but the social aspect of hanging with their friends.
I like to slide rocks, and at the end they always give us hot chocolate.
It feels great to have new stones. The old ones were pretty rough and dented. These ones are nice and new. We're breaking them into the ice.
I like sliding very much. I also like sweeping.
You're trying to throw your rock into the big circle. We work together and try to win the games, and we have fun pretty much.
Yes, anybody gets sad, we cheer them up.
They were teaching us how to slide out and throw a rock with a curl to it so it turns.
It's great to have the kids involved. They're the future of our curling, and we're super excited to have them here.
I'll keep playing until I die.
Hi, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohit Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Meteorologist Russ Lacate is back with the full forecast. You've been talking about snow. Is there a chance that some of it's actually going to land here in Metro Vancouver?
I think there is. Of course, we have such varied elevations here across the South Coast. Yeah, it's getting touch and go early next week, Monday, Tuesday, somewhere in that time frame. There's a possibility, Dan, that things get even colder during the second half of next week. So whether that's a dry cold or whether we get a few flakes, it's certainly going to be interesting. Considering this has really been an El Nino season so far, everything has been incredibly mild. All the flow from the Pacific coming at us from the west-southwest, keeping freezing levels elevated, eliminating snow not only from the lower mainland, but most of the local mountains as well. I wanted to show you something else that I forgot to point out on this chart. Again, with the split in the jet happening offshore, the jet over northern areas is really weakening. You can probably see in the clouds here a little bit of a deformation zone setting up. When that jet weakens, it finally allows the polar vortex to start wobbling and inject a bit of Arctic air into the northern part of the province. Now, it hasn't happened yet. We saw today's high was about, minus 17, I think, in Fort Nelson. Tomorrow, a little light snow, minus 19. So just a shade colder, minus 11 in Fort St. John, a few centimeters of light snow. Dease Lake, again, maybe 1 to 2 centimeters. Terrace with enough warm air working its way in there. 1, maybe 2 degrees above, a lot of rain mixing in. Between the two, Stewart still expected to have a snowfall warning with 15 to 25 centimeters tonight and the first half of the day tomorrow. Stewart's temperature just hangs right around the freezing mark. You get those great big wet flakes that really clump together quickly. Through the central part of the province, of course, temperatures tomorrow pretty much where they were today. Very light flakes, maybe a centimeter's worth of snow, a couple of breaks in the afternoon. These temperatures come down by 10 to 15 degrees this weekend. Southern interior, I think the temperatures only come down by about 5 or 6 degrees this weekend, but that puts us below zero for all communities across the southern interior. And once it cools down, it stays cold for quite some time. So let's just zoom in a little bit here and see what's happening around the South Coast snow situation. Tonight, really just a little bit of mixed precipitation over the peaks. I think tomorrow morning, maybe some snow showing up at the highest elevations on the North Shore Mountains. Otherwise, it is rain everywhere. But happening Thursday night, as it dries out, the freezing level drops to about 800 meters. So really in Metro Vancouver tomorrow, it's wet. It's wet most of the way up the mountains. Friday's wet in the city. It snows on the ski hills. Early next week, maybe a couple of flakes, Dan, in parts of the lower mainland. Stays cold for a number of days.
Some people would be happy to hear that.
Some excitement for sure.
Yeah,
others might be a little nervous about that. Yeah, got the snow tires on yet?
There you go. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Ross. Some marine biologists are raising the alarm about a proposed nuclear waste facility northwest of Ottawa. They say it could threaten an area where endangered mussels are thriving. As Stu Mills reports, the species is already in danger of extinction elsewhere.
Earlier this fall, Dr. Andre Martel and his team of scientists dipped into the Ottawa River here. A wild, 141-kilometer-long, free-flowing section near Westmeath, Ontario.
You're looking into the transect.
Yeah. People are not fully aware of the amazing diversity of habitats, of the unique habitats that this 141 kilometers of river really is there, because you've got free rapids, large rapids, you have spawning grounds for sturgeon, near natural flow, fish abundance is stunning, diversity of habitats.
The longest underwater cave network in Canada, uniquely formed river sand dunes, and an incredible flourishing population of a small brown mollusk.
It's a freshwater mussel. It's a native freshwater mussel of our watershed. And it was collected in 1885. Can you imagine? And it was collected not too far from the Parliament Hill, just downstream by a few kilometers.
The hickory nut mussel is endangered, but here, in this special part of the river, Martel believes it has made a secret life-saving allegiance with a giant prehistoric fish.
It's hard work.
Lake sturgeon can live 100 years and grow to 2 meters in length. This fall, Martel's team sampled sturgeon in the river near Westmeath to try to prove that mussel larvae are spreading here by hitchhiking upstream on the gills of the fish. At the same time, a consortium led by SNC Lavalin has proposed a nuclear waste site just upstream at Chalk River. The plan's been panned by Quebec mayors whose residents draw drinking water from the Ottawa, and by Algonquins who've likened it to an outhouse built next to a drinking well.
I would have some concerns over any type of development that would have the potential to lead to contamination of this water system.
The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission wouldn't answer questions on the Chalk River site, including potential effects on river species, until a decision on the site is made. That's expected in the next few weeks. Stu Mills, CBC News, Gatineau.
What goes up does not always come down. That's especially true in Earth's orbit. It is littered with junk left behind from decades of space missions. And the risk posed by that fast-moving debris only goes up with every new launch. Nicole Mortellaro looks into cleaning up space clutter.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
Space is becoming a very busy place. Since the first satellite blasted into orbit in 1957, there have been more than 6,000 launches. Today, there are, on average, 2 launches a week, driven mainly by SpaceX. Those thousands of launches have left behind a lot of space junk.
When you launch a satellite, you also bring the last stage of the rocket into a stable orbit where the objects can stay for years.
Eventually, the harsh environment of space breaks them down into much smaller pieces, traveling at nearly 8 kilometers a second. And this threatens the satellites we depend on. Those that provide us with TV, that monitor weather, disasters, and more.
If your mission, your satellite gets hit by a debris, it could mean the end of your mission. That means all your investment and all the benefit for people on Earth would disappear immediately.
And we've seen the kind of damage small particles can do. But space agencies like NASA and the European Space Agency do track debris to avoid this from happening. And now a Canadian company is stepping in. In January, the Montreal-based North Star Earth and Space will launch 4 satellites to monitor space debris.
In low Earth orbit, we track objects down to about 1 centimeter. In medium Earth orbit, it would be about 7 to 10 centimeters. And in geostationary orbit, it would be around 40 to 50 centimeters.
But there's been a wider call for companies to be more responsible, not leaving anything behind.
It means you do the same as you would do in every national park, right? The stuff you bring in, you take out again. That's the principle we want to apply.
The European Space Agency has also called for a zero debris charter to clean up orbital debris by 2030. But that will take new innovation and money. Nicole Mortellaro, CBC News, Toronto.
A beloved taxidermy dog, missing since the 1950s, has been found. More on Muggins the Spitz and his mission after this.
It seems like everyone has a different idea about how to dress for a prairie winter. Some bundle up. Others like a more loose-fitting and fashionable look. And the threat of quick frostbite to exposed skin is, well, not that important. It's not just adults that are slaves to fashion. This student had only a light coat and shoes on.
Are you guys out of your minds? No, I guess we're just unprepared for the cold weather.
How do you feel walking even a short distance from the store to the school here?
We're freezing.
What about you? And you're drinking a milkshare. You don't have much on either.
Well, just I'm cold, but I think it's the wind chill factor that's really making it bad. But I don't know. I'm thirsty and I like milkshakes. So
whether it's food or the daily drive to work, Calgarians brave the bitter cold and icy streets today. Most slowed down, but even then, not everyone avoided an accident. There were more than 60 of them, all were minor. Electrical consumption was nearing an all-time record for the second day in a row as the temperature plunged to -30. Even the Bow River was warmer than the air, as water quickly condensed and formed an eerie shroud over the city. But most people seem to take the cold in stride, even those who have to work in it.
You look like you're about ready to fall over now from, are you really?
Oh, no, I was out in the bar watching a hockey game last night.
Oh, so you're a little bit greased, eh?
A little bit.
That helps you stay a little warmer.
Sure, it's antifreeze.
Okay, great.
The air will get colder yet, a low of -34 tonight, and no warming until Friday, when it will be a balmy -5. Wayne Nikatuk, CBC News, Calgary.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Enjoy groundbreaking contemporary works of theatre, dance, music, and multimedia at the annual Push International Performing Arts Festival, January 19th to February 4th. For the festival program and tickets, visit pushfestival.ca. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox and keep connected with us.
London Zoo is kicking off the new year by taking stock of all the animals in its care.
They're on their way. Sorry, it's very quick.
Every inhabitant here will be counted and registered over the next few days. There's some who line up quietly for the annual head count, along with some treats. But it's hard to expect all creatures of all stripes to behave. Some showed no signs of taking things seriously, while other striped creatures stayed curious. There were some head-scratching moments, to say the least. London Zoo is home to more than 300 different species of animals, adding up to about 14,000 creatures. A Greater Victoria couple has discovered a famous wartime mascot stored in their shed, and he's a very good boy. Muggins the dog was known for raising record amounts of money during the First World War, encouraging people to drop change in tins right outside the legislature. He was so beloved that when he died in 1920, he was taxidermied and used for fundraising for the Second World War. In the 1950s, though, he vanished. After learning about that disappearance, a couple realized they were unknowingly harboring a hero.
I said to Phil, that looks like the dog we have in the shed. I'm really happy that we were able to bring him back to life, so to speak.
Yeah. Not every day you rescue a 104-year-old dog.
Indeed. Plans are now in the works for Muggins' future, which may include a visit to a local museum, over a century's worth of service to be continued. Another Vancouver Island couple has evicted a black bear after it was found trying to den underneath their home.
And when we went down there, my husband found a black bear like right in his face. He jumped right back and was like, "Oh my God, the bear is right there. It's right there." And I've never seen, he broke his leg a while ago and I've never seen him move so fast.
Yeah, it's right there. Conservation officers say you can avoid bears taking up residence under your homes by blocking off any ways they can get in. If a bear does try to sneak in rent-free like this one, you're asked to contact the service's Human Wildlife Conflicts Hotline. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC GM, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC. I will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. We'll see you then.